in the bank.
Good Friday morning. Thank you for joining us on the Weather Channel 10 minutes before the hour. You know what time it is. It's time for Storm Watch. As a part of our Storm Watch, we bring you the very latest on the tropics. Our tropical update begins this edition of Storm Watch as we show you the points of origin of tropical storms and hurricanes this week anyway, between the 11th and the 20th. Over the last 120 years, each of these dots represents where the storms have developed, and mainly they've been concentrated closer here to the islands just east of the Caribbean. Also, we've been watching this area over the last 100 years, kind of favorable for thunderstorm activity as well as tropical storm and hurricane development, the western Caribbean as well as the central Gulf of Mexico. Now, as we look into next week, we start to focus a little bit more out across the central Atlantic for a better likelihood of tropical development. Now, all of this is only based on climatology, as you still notice that the frequency of tropical storm and hurricane development is not that great, because you talk about only 37 storms have developed over the last 110 years. So, yeah, you know the infrequency of development. Now, so far, 1998, this week, we have nothing going on, nothing organized over the Gulf. The Caribbean here is void of any tropical development. We don't have anything out across the islands, the Lesser Antilles. We continue to watch this tropical wave, though, a pretty good ways away from the islands, but it's maintaining its convection. It kind of pulsates in terms of gaining convection and then losing it overnight, so we'll continue to watch this. And another area that we were talking about, say, the last 4 to 5 days, the southeast, nothing organized. I want to tell you that right now. We do not anticipate any tropical development, just thunderstorm activity with an area of low pressure that has moved out of Georgia into the Carolinas, heading northward. Again, this is not a tropical system, just some thunderstorm activity associated with it, hugging the coast of North Carolina and the northern fringes here, the coastal areas of South Carolina, but not to worry. Nothing threatening as far as a tropical system goes. As we look at Florida, we've had some higher stratus clouds lingering over the area. The northern Bahamas, but the central and southern Bahamas, clear skies this morning. Most of Cuba. Jamaica, we've had some higher clouds building just to your north as they come across this region. Hispaniola, fair skies. Puerto Rico, clear skies this morning. So the Caribbean, well, we don't have anything organizing in terms of a tropical system. Here is that wave as it starts to sag off. It looks toward the southwest. It has a little more component to the south than it did yesterday, but notice how some of the convection is starting to push south of the 10-degree latitude line. This is 10 degrees, and typically we like to see most of the convection stay above 10 degrees. Based on climatology, it's just more favorable that it will maintain itself and continue on its track if it stays north of 10 degrees latitude. But we've watched some of the convection push south, so that may be an indication that this system has a lesser chance of developing, but we will continue to watch it, as it does look as though the convection is still holding together pretty good. But it's a long ways away now from the islands, Trinidad, Tobago, St. Croix. All of these islands are well off to the west, and we have another 3 to 4 days to watch this system because it's slowly moving off toward the west at only about 5 to 10 miles an hour. Let's see what's going on in the eastern Pacific. Quiet conditions along the latitudes of the Hawaiian Islands, but we are watching this area closer to the Mexican coast, and it looks as though the convection is starting to become a little more concentrated and a little greater here just off the coast of Mexico upstream from the Gulf of Tehuantepec and Acapulco. It's mainly hugging the coast right now. It's not an organized tropical system, but we will definitely have to watch this very closely because this could become our next organized tropical system with upper air winds pretty favorable here in the eastern Pacific. But for now, it's just an area of thunderstorms off the coast of Mexico. Now, speaking of thunderstorms, there's a threat of severe storms later today in central Iowa, northern Missouri, and across the southern parts of Arizona and New Mexico. Already this morning, we've had some thunder shower activity near Tucson here, and beginning to see thunderstorms develop right here over the central parts of Iowa and hugging the coast of the Carolinas. We'll be right back.
Scattered showers are possible in parts of the south as well as the northeast and midwest. Will the rain last through the weekend? Find out next on Weather Center.
If love is your question, Psychic Talk has your answer.
Are you seeing two women right now?
Oh, man.
Well, you think that they won't know? They're psychics.
Carrying on these two relationships, you are looking at fatherhood.
Is someone pregnant now?
No way you could get that right on the money like that.
About your husband, he's a very dominating man.
Storm Watch, we're going to talk about some more bad weather developing across parts of the Midwest come later on this afternoon. But first, our tropical update. We're going to talk about a brand new tropical storm. And standing by to do that is Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thanks, Will. Yeah, we have Tropical Storm Celia out there in the eastern Pacific, and we'll look at her in just a second. Right now, let's look at the Atlantic. It's looking a lot better if you're heading toward the tropics this weekend. You can see out here in the Gulf of Mexico, still in the western Gulf, just beautiful out there. Very little in the way of thunderstorm activity. We have seen that trough move up the east coast and the low pressure center move off the east coast. It's a mid-latitude system now. No chance for development at all there. But we do see a line of thunderstorms starting to develop. We still have westerly winds here over the Florida Panhandle. Very unusual pattern, even in the wintertime, let alone summer. And we'll have to keep an eye on these thunderstorms. But right now, there's no chance for development at all. There's no surface low, and it's just a west wind belt. See some high winds blowing across the Florida Panhandle down toward the Yucatan Peninsula. Those will make for a pretty sunset, but that's about all. Out in the Caribbean, again, wonderful weekend there if you're out fishing. Caribbean, a few thunderstorms way down in the southern, southwestern Caribbean, but for the most part, just a beautiful day out there. A few showers affecting Puerto Rico. Those should blow through here in the next 6 hours or so, and then you'll just be left with night and morning showers along the coastline. We've been looking at that low pressure center coming off the coast of Africa and sitting in the central Atlantic. Here it is here. You can see it's really looking rather weak, to say the least, which is very good news. We have really an elongated area of low pressure that's there now, and you can see this tie of stratocumulus and cumulus clouds with a few isolated showers in there that tie this first system to that other thunderstorm area that we saw off to the east. And so this system is looking rather weak now. Still low pressure out there, so we'll keep an eye on it, but we're really in very good shape from that standpoint. And you can see here, this is it on the infrared imagery indicating some of the deeper thunderstorm activity. You can see really rather minimal thunderstorm activity at this time, which is also very good. Now farther out into the Atlantic and off the African coast, we saw that big massive thunderstorms on the coast yesterday. As it came off the coast, it all but fizzled out, and that's good news. Of course, the wave associated with it is still there, and we'll have to monitor that rather closely. Still a lot of shower activity out here in the eastern Atlantic, and that is going to be maybe a little more concern as we go on into the hurricane season. Of course, right now, July 11th to 20th, not too much generally to speak of, except as we get more into the eastern Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf of Mexico. But now look what happens the following period of time. We've got quite a bit of activity there, especially in the Gulf of Mexico. So the dots start to increase as we go into the heart of the hurricane season. This, of course, is the map for the 21st through the 30th of July. And this is not the heart of the hurricane season yet. So this is the time for you people in the Atlantic off the eastern seaboard. Prepare now and get ready for the heart of the hurricane season that's going to be coming up. Well, let's get back to the eastern Pacific and see what's going on there. We were monitoring an area of disturbed weather there with strong thunderstorms. We had a lot of rain over Acapulco yesterday. That has turned into Tropical Storm Celia. You can see here it's now at 18.4 north. 107 west. That's about 360 miles southeast of Cabo San Lucas here. The winds are now 45 miles per hour. That's based on some ship observations out there, and we've been looking at some Mexican radars that have showed a well-defined low-level circulation there. This system is starting to move more toward the west-northwest, which is very good news for those people along the Mexican coast. But keep in mind, there's still a lot of shower activity there. You can see, here's our latest visible imagery here. The system is way up here on the corner. You can see it's become much better organized with a lot of circular deep thunderstorm activity, and we can see that deep thunderstorm activity here on the infrared imagery. Look at these very, very, very cold cloud tops. Indeed, this is producing a lot of shower activity that's moving on the coast, really from Zihuatanejo, Manzanillo, and some of the shower activity is going to affect Cabo San Lucas the next 24 hours as well. So we'll keep an eye on that, but the track is generally toward the west-northwest, away from the coast at this time. Well, let's get back to Will and see what he's got going on around the country and what's brewing for you there.
Thanks a lot, Steve. And once again, we'll show you what's happening all around the nation. Once again, we'll talk about a blistering heat wave at the top of the hour one more time, from Texas all the way into the southwestern part of the country. As far north as around Walla Walla, Washington, and Boise, Idaho, it's going to be another blistering heat wave all weekend long. And once again, we'll talk about some of those showers and storms across the Midwest heading towards St. Louis.
The dog days of summer descend with a vengeance on much of the West, with dangerously high temperatures possible through the weekend. Details next on Weather Center.
Dream along with me.
He has had 148 songs on the pop chart spanning 4 decades, 50 top 10 hits, 14 #1 hits.
Magic.
Now, Cornerstone Promotions brings you a classic collection by the great Perry Como.
Find a wheel and it goes round, round, round.
Diggity dog, diggity boom, what you do to me?
Don't let the stars get in your eyes, don't let the moon break your heart. Catch a falling star and put it in your pocket. No.
About a severe thunderstorm watch and other areas of the country that may see severe weather this evening. But for now, with the tropical update, here's Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thanks, Rich. We've got some interesting things to talk about. The tropical storm in the eastern Pacific is of interest to those of you along the Mexican coast. And in the Atlantic basin, we're pretty much quiet for the weekend, I think. I'll show you that in just a second. Here's the latest information on Tropical Storm Celia. Currently sitting right down here off the coast, just to the west of Manzanillo here, at about 19.2 north and 107.8 west. It was moving to the west-northwest. Now it's tracking a little more northwest, northwest at about 14 miles an hour. Slowed down just slightly. Pressure is 1,003 millibars. Now the forecast for the system is to continue to move off to the northwest the next 24 to 36 hours. Current intensity is 45 miles an hour. There could be some potential for slight strengthening the next 24 or 30 hours or so, but then as it moves out farther off of the Baja coast here, we're going to get some cold stratocumulus air entraining into the system and a little colder sea surface temperature. So we don't expect the system to develop into a hurricane as we speak right now. Now here's the latest infrared satellite image. You can see a lot of deep thunderstorm activity over the top of it. The actual surface center is somewhere here on the north side of the deepest convection. That's based on the radar from the Mexican coast over here. And right now, most of the shower activity is moved offshore. You've got a lot of overcast along the Mexican coast, but luckily most of the heaviest shower activity is well offshore. And that's going to stay that way. The closest approach to land looks like it's going to be somewhere tomorrow evening, close to Cabo San Lucas, and then move off the coast and arc back to the west a little bit. So we'll keep an eye on this system for you, but right now it looks like we're free and clear from land, and maybe a little bit of shower activity heading toward Cabo the next 24 to 30 hours or so. Now in the Atlantic basin, we've been seeing a lot of shower activity off the east coast with associated surface trough. That's crept down in the Gulf of Mexico, and we had a few showers down there this afternoon. Nothing developing there. Western Gulf of Mexico almost mirror-like with light and variable winds and virtually clear skies, few scattered cumulus clouds. That's about all. So we're in great shape there. In the Caribbean, we've seen some wonderful weather the last few days. It continues to be nice over the islands here. Down here in the southwestern Caribbean Sea, we've noticed some flare-up in thunderstorm activity. That's partly related to an upper-level feature here, and that should go away here the next 24 hours. No spin-up expected there at all. Now, we've been looking at a couple of features out here in the Atlantic. One was this low-pressure center here in the central Atlantic heading toward the Windward Islands. That system, you can see the thunderstorm activity had died away almost completely and now is coming back a little bit, consistent with that diurnal variation, that day-to-night change. We get most of the thunderstorm activity occurring in the night and early morning and weakening during the late afternoon hours. But this system is weakening rather dramatically. The latest satellite winds that we've looked at here at the Weather Channel, we can't find a low-level center anymore for this system. Now, it may come back, but right now it's on the weakening stages. It may track to the Windward Islands the next 24 to 30 hours, 48 hours, but right now we're in pretty good shape with it. Farther out to the east, we've been looking at sort of a random bit of thunderstorm activity shooting off the coast here. We had a big band of thunderstorms moving off the coast earlier, and it since has dissipated off the African coast, but this wave action here in the mid and lower troposphere, lower part of the atmosphere, is still there and will push to the west. We'll have to monitor that rather carefully. We can see at the upper level winds, still favorable conditions over the Atlantic basin here, and we'll have to watch that as we go into the heart of the hurricane season here. Big upper level low pressure axis here, and that is associated with that deep thunderstorm activity over the extreme southwest Caribbean. So we're pretty good for the weekend. This is a great time to go out and prepare because, as you well know, here we are, July 11 to 20. Not too many dots out here, but as we go farther out into the season, the number of storms in the past will increase. So pay attention to that, and now just remember, what do you do in a hurricane warning? Here are safe side tips for you. A few things. Make sure you protect your windows with shutters or plywood. Tape doesn't really do the trick for you, so board those up if you do get into a hurricane warning. Well, let's talk about what's going on across the country severe weather-wise with Rich.
Thank you, Steve. As we check out across the country, there's going to be a chance of some severe weather. Even last hour at Mount Rushmore, large hail at Mount Rushmore. Some big storms possible. There's a severe weather watch for parts of Iowa. We'll talk much more about severe weather, also about the heat wave. That's coming up after the local conditions on Weather Center.
The dog days of summer descend with a vengeance on much of the West, with dangerously high temperatures possible through the weekend. Details next on Weather Center.
Make the smart move. Join the thousands of truck owners who've already put the load handler to work. Whether big or small, the load handler works on any truck. From groceries to gravel, the load handler handles every load. I'm Terry Jones, president of Load Handler Industries, and I personally believe
It is 10 minutes before the top of the hour. Time now for Storm Watch. But before we get into the precipitation across the nation and the potential for strong storms, I want to talk about your tropical update. And this go around will start you into the eastern Pacific. Why, you ask? Well, because we're dealing with our third tropical storm of the 1998 season in this region. And I'm talking about Tropical Storm Celia. And these are the very latest coordinates on Celia, in case you're plotting at home, centered at 19.9 north, 108.5 west, 220 miles southeast of Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Sustained winds are now up to 60 miles per hour. It's moving to the northwest at 16 miles per hour, and the estimated central pressure at 1,000 millibars. So the estimated pressure has gone down just a bit. The winds have gone up just a bit, and we think that we might still find some slight strengthening with this, and then it's going to move over cooler water and get into more stable conditions and perhaps weaken beyond that. But the important thing to note is that this, by tomorrow afternoon, will be passing just south of the California Baja, just south of Cabo San Lucas, in fact. And so some tropical storm warnings have been established from around La Paz on southward. So higher surf,
Eventually more clouds and some precipitation, and you're going to find some windier conditions coming into play here as we head into Saturday afternoon. So if you're going to take a flight down to this region and maybe head out to the yacht or head out to your boat, definitely you're going to want to stay in port. This certainly is not a situation you want to be taking the boat out. Leave it anchored where it is and ride this thing out. Again, we think it will be passing just to the south here of the California Baja, and we'll be watching that very closely as we go into your Saturday afternoon. Obviously already some clouds working on into this region, heavier precipitation along the coast here of Mexico, and although it seems a little disorganized, the center of circulation is not real obvious here. Again, it is going to be coming close enough to this area to certainly affect it in one way or one form, and obviously you can expect to find some precipitation, maybe some gustier winds, and certainly some higher surf, so keep that in mind. Let's take you a little further south and eastward of Cecilia. Nothing too organized here. Still some bands of convection in some regions and still seeing some rain into parts of Central America on into Mexico, but again, nothing showing any real organization at this time. This is one of the preferred areas early in the hurricane season as we talk about the Atlantic Basin. It's the Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean. Pretty much all we're seeing are the typical thunderstorms firing up over the land masses, and then they dissipate as we go on into the evening. Nothing too terribly organized here. We've watched this particular little wave try and work its way on westward, seeing the convection or the thunderstorms flaring up and then dying out. So we'll continue to watch that, but at this point it's in an area where we're seeing a lot of actually downward motion and subsidence, and so we're not seeing anything really developing with that. And we've also watched this little wave literally fade as it moves off to the west. So nothing really happening here into the eastern Atlantic. There again is a quick peek at the upper level winds. When we talk about the upper level winds, we look for upper level high pressure as far as favorable regions for development are concerned. And while we find some areas of upper level high pressure, we're not really seeing anything happening at this point in time toward the surface. Again, the preferred areas as we go through the middle of July, generally here as we go into the Western Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico, we start to see the possibility of some development a little further eastward, and as we get a little later into the hurricane season, we'll see that becoming more prevalent. Keep in mind, over the past 101 years or so, we've only seen 21 storms from the span of July 11th to July 20th. So although it's a preferred area in some of these regions, it's not entirely likely we're going to see development. Remember, the peak of the hurricane season is actually September 10th, around that time. But nevertheless, this is the time to get prepared. So this would be the time to run out to the stores and get all the items that you need for your disaster preparedness kit, and just kind of keep some of these things in mind should you see some sort of a landfalling tropical system, maybe a hurricane or a tropical storm later in the season. And remember that if you live anywhere along the coast, you are vulnerable to that during the hurricane season. Taking you back to the lower 48, we've got a few thunderstorms to worry about here. First stop ahead of our cold front in the northeast, and a lot of these are dying out. But in around Bangor, Maine, we're still finding a few thunderstorms. What we've got into southern New England has weakened considerably. There's a closer inspection of some of those up into Maine. Take you next on into Boston. Again, all this kind of falling apart west and south of 495, so things looking a little better around the Beantown area. Into the southeast, looking better here as well. And then we're going to take you all the way into the southwest, hopefully here, and I'll be able to show you that conditions are looking a little better as we get into southeastern Arizona, with some of these thunderstorms winding down as well.
The heat continued its assault on the western half of the country today. Will tomorrow be any more bearable? A look at conditions there.